It's a new tax every time you fill your glass, a tax to take a bath, a tax to do the laundry, a tax to water your flowers. It's a terrible idea.
Local authorities are fighting back against a proposed state tax on water.
To this point, we haven't had term limits. We've had term limits, so it's on the mayor only and not on all of our elected officials.
Measure B and C in National City both expand term limits, but look a little closer and you'll see the measure is to keep one official in office.
I've got 1,350 toilet seats hanging in here.
And a 96-year-old folk artist creates work on an unusual canvas. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Ebony Monet. A caravan of Central American asylum seekers captured national attention as President Trump said they wouldn't be allowed into the U.S. Now hearings are underway in San Diego for 3 women associated with the caravan. KPBS Frontiers reporter Jean Guerrero says they're being prosecuted for first-time illegal entry.
Earlier this month, Attorney General Jeff Sessions said the U.S. would prosecute 100% of illegal border crossings.
If you cross the border unlawfully, then we will prosecute you. It's that simple.
But defense attorneys representing the women say the government is not going after everyone, but rather discriminating against Central Americans. The attorneys on the case weren't willing to speak on the record, but Ginger Jacobs is an immigration attorney who's been following the crackdown on the Central Americans.
Under the Constitution, all people should be treated equally. There's distinguishing people based on where they're from is absolutely prohibited by the Constitution.
In a court filing, Border Patrol says they singled out these women based on their membership in the caravan, not because of their national origin. First-time illegal entry is a misdemeanor punishable by up to 6 months in prison. Previously, the U.S. focused prosecutions on repeat offenders. Jean Guerrero, KPBS News.
Earlier this week, teachers in National City took a step closer to striking. Tonight, they're applying even more pressure with a rally outside the school board meeting. KPBS education reporter Megan Burks is there and joins us now. Megan.
That's right, Ebony. A majority of the teachers union, I should say, voted on Monday whether or not to authorize a strike. And in fact, 88% of them did go ahead and approve that strike. They were hoping that would apply pressure during an all-day mediation with the district today. But teachers here are saying that they had no luck today. They still do not have a contract. And that's why if you look over my shoulder, you can see that they're rallying tonight to continue to apply the pressure and to continue to ask for a fair deal. I spoke earlier with the president of the teachers union about what the sticking points are. Let's hear from her.
Our district has offered us 0% on salary schedule with a 2% bonus, and we are standing firm at 4%. Our members are working hard. They're overworked. We take things home. We're buying our own school supplies, and it's time for the district to acknowledge that.
Thank you. Now, the district says that it cannot comment on ongoing negotiations, but they did share their most recent update from bargaining with us, and it shows that they did increase the benefits cap for teachers, and they also added some incentives for some of that extra work you heard about. The teachers tell us they they really do not want to strike, but they will go all the way if the district forces them to. They can't do that until after their contract ends June 30th, which of course is during the summer. So it looks like we may be in some protracted negotiations going into the next month. Reporting live in National City, Megan Burks, KPBS News.
Thank you, Megan. Water bills could be going up under a plan in Sacramento. A tax on drinking water is being advanced through the state Senate to pay for water treatment plants in underserved communities. But some San Diego County leaders are fighting back. KPBS health reporter Susan Murphy has more from the county administration building.
County leaders and water authority officials announced their opposition to the water tax in front of this Guardian of the Water statue. It symbolizes San Diego's protection over one of its most precious resources, water.
That's a new tax every time you fill your glass, a tax to take a bath, a tax to do the laundry, a tax to water your flowers. It's a terrible idea.
The proposed $135 million per year tax would pay to treat polluted water across the state. It would impose a 95-cent per month water tax on most households and higher charges for business and agriculture industries. An estimated 300 communities and 1 million Californians are exposed to contaminated, unsafe drinking water. But the regional leaders say taxing a basic human need to address the problem would set a dangerous precedent. They say it should be the state's responsibility.
It doesn't make sense to place a disproportionate responsibility on ratepayers to clean up groundwater contamination caused by others.
Haney Hong is president and CEO of the San Diego Tax Association. He says adding another tax burden to residents in one of the nation's most expensive states is not the answer.
We expect our elected leaders to come up with efficient solutions to the problems that we face. And this is not one of those solutions. The rest of us should not have to pay for something that was caused by polluters.
The leaders proposed several funding options that would help address the unsafe water issues, including charging polluters, creating a trust fund from state budget surpluses, and applying cap-and-trade funds. State legislators are expected to vote on the tax by mid-June. Susan Murphy, KPBS News.
Oceanside is prepping for the summer season without the benefit of fresh sand pumped onto its beaches. KPBS North County reporter Allison St. John says the annual dredging of the Oceanside Harbor has been delayed yet again.
Two problems are created when the entrance to Oceanside's harbour, the mouth of the harbour, is not dredged. The most obvious is that thousands of yards of sand are not spread on the beach, ready for summer visitors. But it can also make it difficult for boats to get in and out of the harbour. This year, the Army Corps of Engineers failed to get the necessary permits in time, and the dredging will not happen before the summer season starts. Oceanside lifeguard Lieutenant Blake Formuina says that could pose a problem for boaters because a sandbar builds up at the harbour mouth.
The harbour mouth can be a concern when we don't get our annual dredging. Sand builds up all summer long in the harbour mouth, which makes it very shallow and susceptible to a lot of wave actions, which are not good for boaters. And when we see more waves in the summertime, into the fall, we definitely have some more boating accidents.
Almost 1,000 boats and yachts are moored in Oceanside's harbour, and whale-watching cruises operate from here. Last year, nearly 450,000 cubic yards of sand was dredged from the harbour mouth and pumped down to the beaches where it was spread out by bulldozers. What remains of that sand is visible as a shelf several feet high. Much was washed away by winter storms. The Army Corps of Engineers says the harbour mouth should be okay until the fall, but that won't help the summer beaches. Tourists spent more than $350 million last year in Oceanside, a 10% increase from the year before. The beach and the harbour are major attractions. Allison St. John, KPBS News.
Median home prices hit a record high in Southern California, but analysts say that's not the whole story. According to CoreLogic, the median price of a San Diego County home was $570,000 last year, $45,000 more than homes sold the same time last year. Still, CoreLogic researchers point out despite the gains in sale prices, homeowners are taking a hit due to an increase in interest rates. Two ballot measures are managing to confuse a lot of voters in National City. On the surface, measures B and C both expand term limits for elected officials. But look a bit closer, and one particular elected official stands to benefit most from one of those measures. KPBS reporter Jade Hyman explains.
So here's the short of a long story. Back in 2004, the voters of National City passed Prop T. Prop T put a term limit in place for the mayor's office. Each term is 4 years, and you can only serve 3 back-to-back. After that, time's up. 70% of voters said, let someone else get elected.
Like in the city of San Diego, the mayor is a strong mayor. Yeah. But in National City, they're just a vote on the council.
Political scientist Carl Luna has been watching National City politics play out for decades.
The idea that term limits keep you from getting entrenched politicians. The mayor would be termed out in 2018, this next election cycle, when lo and behold,
there's a new measure out, Measure B. It puts a standard 2-term limits on all elected city officials.
You got to balance it.
Let its most vocal supporter, current Mayor Ron Morrison, tell it. Measure B would mirror what most other cities have, consistent term limits for all elected officials, not just the mayor's office.
B puts us basically in line with what other cities do, the idea of 2 consecutive terms, and for all elected positions. To this point, we haven't had term limits. We've had term limit. So it's on the mayor only and not on all of our elected officials, which includes the council members, the city clerk, and the city treasurer.
But not only does Measure B set term limits on everyone, it also hits the reset button on the term limit clock for the one guy who's already been in office 12 years and is terming out, Mayor Morrison.
Clearly, it would help the current mayor, who would get an additional 8 years in office under this, where in 2004 the voter intent was to have him have no more than 12 years. This is kind of like changing the rules after the fact.
It is a deceptive measure that would repeal the 2004 law, allowing him to run for another 2 terms.
Jose Rodriguez lives in National City. He's running for city council, and he's fired up about Measure B.
I think it's hypocritical. I think it's backwards, and I think we need a change.
So in response, he's pushing Measure C. We'll let Carl Luna explain it.
So then a countermeasure was put on the ballot which says, no, we're going to keep the original limitation on the mayor from 2004, which means he's termed out in 2018, but then put term limits on the city council going forward.
That means extending term limits to other elected positions without resetting the mayor's clock.
What happens in National City is people decide to jump from one elected position to another, and they stay here for 40, 50 years. I think public service is good, but people have to change with the times. And allowing new people to come up is going to allow our city to be flexible to deal with issues in the future.
But Morrison feels experience is what National City needs, not new leadership. So after 14 years on city council and 12 years as mayor, what else does Morrison want to do?
Oh my gosh, there is tons of stuff. We're getting ready to open up the waterfront, and there's a big dispute. The groups that they back want to turn everything into parks, which is really nice, really nice. The problem is our city, like most cities, are looking at deficits coming into the future because there's less revenue coming in because of internet sales, things along that line.
The mayor's been in office for a quarter of a century, and he hasn't accomplished, he says, what he wants to. But if you haven't done it in a quarter of a century, you're probably never going to do it.
Luna says between Measures B and C, you'll find petty politics, accusations of entrenched government, and the possibility of no one walking away the victor, while nearly 1 in 4 National City residents lives below poverty.
Often when you have competing props, though, it divides up the vote and they both fail, so you might be left with the status quo after all this.
Jade Hindman, KPBS News.
The District 8 seat in San Diego is up for grabs this year. It's the only council district, in fact, without an incumbent running. Candidate Christian Ramirez is the Human Rights Director for Alliance San Diego. He spoke with KPBS reporter Susan Murphy about his campaign.
Christian Ramirez, welcome. What are your top priorities for District 8?
Well, District 8 has been abandoned by the city of San Diego. Shamefully, District 8 is still home to the most polluted communities in the county of San Diego, Otay Mesa and San Isidro along the U.S.-Mexico border. And in the north, Logan Heights and Sherman Heights, where I live, rate the highest in terms of pediatric asthma. I want to make sure that we tackle that issue so that we could truly call America's finest city, San Diego. We also want to focus on housing. The housing crisis is hitting working class San Diegans terribly. So we want to tackle that issue as one of the top agenda items if I get elected by the residents of District 8.
Okay, and you work with Alliance San Diego on national immigration policies, which is many steps removed from City Council. What has prepared you for local issues?
I must say I'm on unpaid leave from Alliance San Diego at this juncture. But for the past 20 years, I've been advocating for immigration reform at the federal level. I've had the opportunity to testify before Congress on multiple occasions, to meet with both Republicans and Democrats on Capitol Hill, to meet with high-level administration officials. But I know that in this current climate in our country, if we're going to defend our democracy from the kind of government that we have at this juncture, we need to start at the local level. And the 20 years of advocacy at the federal level has prepared me to tackle the important issues that residents in District 8 have faced, where 4 generations of my family live. This is a community that I love, and I want to come back home and fight hard to ensure that folks in District 8 are treated with dignity and respect.
And Councilman Alvarez has been the lone no vote on council on a number of homeless initiatives. He voted against setting up shelter tents, creating a storage facility in Sherman Heights, and many others. How would you have voted on these issues?
Well, the first thing that I would have done is to present workable solutions. The way that this storage facility was proposed by the mayor's office was shameful. The residents of Sherman Heights or Barrio Logan or Logan Heights were not consulted. If they have been consulted, we would have told the mayor's office that building a storage facility next to an elementary school is a bad idea. But the approach was politicized, and Councilmember Alvarez voted against these initiatives, but presented no alternative. The mayor's office imposed a half-baked idea, and at the end of the day, the folks who suffered were the residents of District 8. My approach is going to be different. I'm going to ensure that we present workable solutions, find common ground, and then ensure that the residents of District 8 are folded into policy making that we urgently need in our community.
And Councilman Alvarez did team up with Republican Councilman Scott Sherman last year to come up with a detailed set of initiatives to reduce housing costs. What specific ideas do you have to tackle the housing crisis?
The city and the Metropolitan Transit Service have multiple parcels of land that are not well utilized. We need to turn those parcels of land into affordable housing. We need to ensure that we increase density in District 8. We need to consider rent control to ensure that we limit the high cost of rents that are impacting working class San Diegans. So these are 2 initiatives that I want to work with other council members and other local government agencies so that we begin to look at parcels of land that may be abandoned and turn those into affordable housing units.
Okay, and you mentioned rentals. Do you have a plan to regulate short-term vacation rentals?
I do. I believe that short-term vacation rentals should be only allowed for folks who have an extra spare bedroom in their home or a granny flat in their backyard. District 8 residents need extra income to make ends meet. And I don't believe in banning short-term rentals. I believe in having sensible policies that ensure that we don't promote gentrification, but at the same time allow local residents to have a little bit of extra income at the end of the month.
How would you work to improve public transit or biking options in your district?
I believe that students should have free public transportation, particularly communities in the northern part of my district. High school students have to walk miles or sometimes take public transit to school. We should allow our students to have free rides on the trolley, on the buses. I want to make sure that we also have bike lanes in our communities. We need to have bikeable communities, walkable communities, and that's not the case in District 8 today.
And looking at your stances on issues, where do you most disagree with your opponents?
Where I most disagree is on the issues having to do with standing with working class families. For far too long, District 8 has been used as a stepping stone to further political careers, and that has left our communities behind. I have dedicated my life to advocate for my community. I'm not seeking higher political office. I want to make sure that finally we have someone in City Hall that represents the community of District 8 that fights for working class San Diegans. That has not been the case in the past.
Christian Ramirez, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And for all of our election stories, including more in-depth interviews with candidates, go to kpbs.org/election.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, one-on-one with James Clapper after President Trump attacks the former director of national intelligence. Coming up at 7, right after Evening Edition on KPBS.
Well, the sun makes an appearance now and then, but lingering clouds are here to stay for the next few days anyways. Julia Wyden has more in tonight's forecast.
Hey, good evening. It was a pretty decent day, although it started off with a bit of drizzle in some spots and a good amount of cloud cover along the coast. That's something that we are going to be seeing for the next several days, so it's going to be a pattern that sticks around. As we widen out the view for you, you can see that there's still some wet weather up into Nevada and across the Sierra Nevadas. That's going to hang on tough for your Thursday as well. We're continuing to bring in that moisture from the Pacific as we go through tonight. That's going to help to thicken up the cloud cover and allow for some areas of fog in your coastal spots again for tomorrow morning. Farther inland, though, I think you'll be staying on the clear side of things. Likely going to be seeing again some clouds and some morning mist for folks who are closer to the shoreline. 61 degrees is your overnight low temperature for tonight. As we look around the area, you can see in Oceanside might be a little bit cooler than that, at around 58 degrees. We'll be in the low 60s in Borrego Springs, Mount Laguna, 48 degrees. Now for Thursday, we're watching an area of low pressure that's out over the Pacific. That dip in the jet stream is coming down south enough to usher in some cooler conditions for folks in central California. Down here in Southern California, though, I think our temperatures are going to remain on the comfortable side here. We'll see those numbers really heating up for folks in the deserts as we get into late in the weekend and into the start of next week. Let's take a look at your high temperature, though, for Thursday. We'll be in the 60s in many spots. Oceanside 68 degrees, San Diego 67, Chula Vista 67 degrees. Borrego Springs going to be a hot 93. So for that weekend forecast, again, we will have a brief dip downwards in temperatures in many spots before those numbers start to rise yet again. As we check in on your extended outlook for the coast, you'll see the numbers will dip briefly on Saturday, high of 68 degrees, but back to 70 on Sunday. Inland temperatures are going to be in the upper 60s to low 70s. Through the start of the weekend, getting a little bit warmer into early next week. Forecast for the mountain region will be in the mid 60s for Thursday. Lots of sunshine expected. And for the desert areas, we'll be dropping to the low 80s Saturday, rising to the 90s for Sunday and Monday.
San Diego got good marks in a national survey of parks in the country's largest 100 cities. KPBS environment reporter Eric Anderson has more.
San Diego and Chula Vista both had their park systems evaluated in the Trust for Public Lands annual survey of city parks in the nation's 100 largest cities. But the two cities are on different ends of the list. Now, San Diego was ranked 16th with good marks for access, acreage, and investment in parks. Report author Charlie McCabe says Chula Vista was ranked significantly lower at 76th.
The score is actually higher than San Diego, so it has more things like playgrounds and basketball hoops, but in terms of both acreage and investment, it's much lower, and access is also lower.
Not all of San Diego's neighborhoods share in the city's rich bounty of public parks. A recent survey by the San Diego Foundation found many inner city neighborhoods have a park deficit because there isn't enough parkland in easy walking distance. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
A 96-year-old artist in San Antonio is looking to retire, and he's hoping his collection of work made over the past 50 years or so will stay intact. AP reporter Alan Breed introduces us to Barney Smith, king of the commode.
It's officially open, ready for you to come on in.
Around San Antonio, Barney Smith is folk art royalty.
The king of the commode.
And the corrugated metal garage behind his Alamo Heights home is his throne room.
I've got 1,350 toilet seats hanging in here.
He's got one festooned with $1 million in shredded greenbacks, and another with a piece of the doomed Challenger shuttle. But why toilet seats?
Well, I'm a master plumber retired. I thought I ought to stick with my trade.
It started as a way to mount hunting trophies.
It was just my hobby.
But as the collection grew, word got out.
Hello.
Then came the tourists. Smith doesn't ask much of visitors. Just sign his guest book and a toilet seat.
Don't write too small now.
1, 2, 3.
Toilet seat.
Got it.
See, that'll make you smile.
You're too much.
Smith creates his masterworks from scraps. Admirers also send him little treasures.
This is Saddam Hussein's piece of toilet out of the green zone.
Smith knows that many people might consider his art a lot of time down the drain.
If I would have just read my Bible as many hours as I spent on my toilet seats, I'd be a better man. This is the last one I'm working on.
Smith is still adding to his collection, but at 96, he says the museum is just more than he can handle.
I have no feelings in my hand. I've got arthritis setting up in my joints.
In 2014, he lost Louise, his wife of 74 years. Now, after rejecting countless offers to sell individual pieces, Smith is looking for a buyer. But it has to be someone willing to keep the collection intact.
It's not being raffled off.
Austin publisher Daedalus Hoffman is trying to ensure it doesn't come to that. His Cattywampus Press has produced a full-color book about Smith and his vision.
For me, Barney's story is about the innate human desire to create and communicate. He is a folk artist, and his story and his life work merits preservation.
Walking away will be hard.
There is a lot of me in there.
But Smith hopes he's inspired people to recognize beauty where most see only junk. Alan Breed, Associated Press, Alamo Heights, Texas.
Now, here's a look at what we are working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. On Morning Edition, shutting down a national anthem protest at NFL games, the compromise for players who would rather kneel. And on Midday Edition, a conversation with Broadway superstar Audra McDonald before her performance with the San Diego Symphony. That's tomorrow on KPBS Radio. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/Evening Edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.